Tip Lewis and His Lamp, Chapter 14, Part 1. Every idle word that men shall speak, they shall give account thereof in the day of judgment. Howard Minturn was a king among the schoolboys, so though some of them nudged each other and laughed a little when Tip swung open the iron gate and appeared in Mr. Minturn's grounds, the most of them, seeing how quickly Howard sprang forward, and how heartily he greeted the newcomer, did the same. Howard was his father all over again. If he did a thing at all, he did it well. Every moment of that afternoon was enjoyed as only boys know how to enjoy holidays. The whole round of winter fun was gone through with. Coasting, snowballing, building forts, rolling in the snow. Each had their turn. Tip was not one whit behind the rest in all these matters, and if ever boy enjoyed an afternoon, he did that one. The sun had set in its clear cold beauty, and the sharp winter night was coming down. The boys stood at the foot of the hill waiting for Ellis and his sled, which were at the top. They came at last, shooting down the glassy surface. "Hurry up," called out Howard as he spun along. "What the mischief became of you? We thought you had gone to hunt up Sir John Franklin and crew." "Hurry down, I should say you meant," answered Ellis, guiding his sled skillfully around the curve and springing to his feet. "I waited for the rest of you. Thought you were coming back." "No," said Howard, "we just ain't. We appointed a committee to find out how many were frozen up altogether entirely, and found that every single one of us were. So we're going into the library fire to get thawed out by tea time." "All right," said Ellis, shouldering his sled. "Howard, where are your skates?" "Oh, bother! They're at the top of that awful hill. Never mind, you walk on slowly and I'll run back and get them." The boys obeyed, and Ellis Holbrook was just swinging open the little gate that led to Mr. Minturn's grounds when Howard called as he ran down the hill. "Hold on, don't go that way. It'll lead you right through the deepest snow there is. Take the big gate." And by the time he reached them, panting and breathless, they were at the big gate. "This is jolly," said Will Bailey, throwing himself into a great armchair before the glowing fire. "My, I believe I'm a snowball." "You'd have been an icicle if you'd gone the way Ellis was leading you. Why, the snow is so high," said Howard, raising his hand almost on a level with his head. Ellis laughed. "I'm sure I thought I was going right," he said. "I must have been thinking of yesterday's lesson in Sunday school. 'Enter ye in at the strait gate.'" "Ho," said Will Bailey, "for that matter, one gate is as straight as the other." "You don't understand the Bible, my boy," said Howard, laying his hand on Will's shoulder with a provoking little pat, "or you'd know that straight means narrow." "I'll bet $1 you were no wiser yourself until Father explained the verse yesterday," said Ellis, laughing. Tip meantime stood apart, flushed and silent. He knew about the Sunday lesson, and remembered the solemn talk which Mr. Holbrook had given them, and remembered how he urged them, while they were young, to enter into that strait gate. He felt shocked and troubled at the sound of Ellis's careless words. "I know one thing," he said abruptly. "Do you?" said Will Bailey in a mocking tone. "That's very strange." Will felt above Tip and took care to let him know it. Ellis turned a quick, indignant glance on him, and then spoke to Tip in a kind and interested tone. "What were you going to say, Tip?" "That if I were the minister's son, I wouldn't make fun of the Bible." Ellis's face was red in an instant. "What do you mean by that?" he asked haughtily. "Just what I say," was Tip's cool reply. "Do you pretend to say that I make fun of the Bible? Humph! Didn't I hear you?" "No," said Ellis in a heat, "you didn't, and I'd thank you not to say so, neither." "Well now," said Tip, "I'll leave it to any boy here if you didn't. When a fellow takes a thing in the Bible and twists it around and makes believe it means some silly little thing that it don't mean at all, I call that making fun." "Pooh," said Howard, coming to the rescue of his friend. "What a fuss you're making about nothing. You're getting wise, aren't you, Tip? Ellis was only saying that verse in fun, just as lots of people do. I've heard good men quote the Bible and laugh over it." "Can't help that," said Tip boldly. "I say it's wicked. And Ellis Holbrook's father says so too. I heard him tell Will Bailey once that folks ought to be very careful how they said things that were in the Bible." "Did he tell you to go around preaching for him through the week? How much does he pay you for your services? Come, let's hear." This was said in Will Bailey's most disagreeable tone. Before Tip had time to answer, Ellis spoke again. "Well, I don't pretend to be as good as some people are, but I really can't see any awful wickedness in anything that I've said tonight." "Neither can anybody else except Tip," said Will, "and he's good, you know. He never does anything wrong, except to tell lies and swear, or some little matters." Ellis was an honest boy. "No," he said gravely, "there's no use in saying what isn't true for the sake of helping my side along. Tip don't do either of those things nowadays, I believe, but I'm sure I don't thank him for his good opinion of me." Howard was glad at this moment to hear the tea bell peal through the house, for the boys were growing cross. Most of them had been so astonished at the bold stand which Tip had taken that they said nothing, only gathered around and waited to see what would come next. Howard sprang up. "There's something I for one am ready for. Come, boys!" And he led the way to the dining room. Oh, that dining room with its bright lights and splendid table was such a wonderful sight to Tip. It was a very nice birthday supper. Plates of warm biscuits, platters of cold chicken, dishes of beautiful honey, silver cake baskets filled with heavily frosted cake. Tip, for one, had never seen such a sight in his life before, and he was so bewildered with the dazzle and glitter he didn't know which way to turn. "Howard," said Mrs. Minturn, turning to her son, after she had welcomed his friends, "do you want your father to take the head of the table, or would you and the boys prefer having the room to yourselves?" "No, ma'am," answered Howard with energy, "we want you and father both. I guess I want you to my party, whoever else I have." Tip watched the bright light on Howard's face with surprise. How much he seemed to love his mother, and how much she loved him. How queer it was! The supper was a great success. The boys forgot their excitement and ill humor and enjoyed everything. It was almost 9 o'clock, the hour when it was generally understood that the party was to break up. The boys had been very merry all the evening. The discussion which had taken place just before tea seemed to have been forgotten, except by Ellis, who, genial and hearty enough with the others, was cold and haughty to Tip. Still, they kept apart, and the fun had gone on famously. There was a sudden lull in the uproar when Mr. Minturn opened the door. "Are the walls left?" he asked, coming forward. "The walls?" said Ellis inquiringly. "Why, sir, did you expect to miss them?" "Well, I had some such fears, but I see they're all right." "What are you up to?" "Ellis was telling a story. That's what we were laughing at when you came in," said Howard. "Go on, El. Never mind father. He likes to hear stories." "No," said Ellis, blushing crimson. "I think I'll be excused." "Go ahead," said Mr. Minturn. "I'm very fond of stories." "I was only telling, sir, how Joe Barnes talked to his father when I was down there this morning." "Yes, and father, you'd be perfectly astonished to hear him," chimed in Howard. "I never heard a fellow go on so in my whole life. He makes fun of every single thing his father says." End of part 1.